Their quiet mansion hid secrets that not even money could conceal. Disguised as a gardener, a millionaire set out to discover who truly cared for his ailing mother. But what he saw was cruelty masked as affection, and a caregiver brave enough to stand against injustice. At the right moment, he revealed his identity, and the truth echoed louder than any fortune. New York City was breathing the humid heat of August when Robert Miller parked his imported car 3 blocks before reaching the mansion he had inhabited for 15 years. The Upper East Side neighborhood slept under the weight of century-old trees and high walls that hid stories that never reached the streets. Robert turned off the engine and sat there still, his hands on the steering wheel, feeling his heart pound erratically against his chest. He had made a decision that would change everything, and there was no turning back. At 42, Robert had built an empire in the real estate market. Buildings bearing his signature dotted the entire city, from Brooklyn Heights to the West Village. His last name opened doors, his credit card had no limit, and his schedule was always packed with appointments that moved millions. But none of that mattered at that moment. What mattered was the trembling voice of Martha, the cook who had worked in the house since before he was born, when she called 3 days ago, almost whispering into the phone. "Mrs. Helena isn't well, Mr. Robert. She's always crying, hiding, and when we try to help, Miss Christine won't let us. She says it's an old woman's fuss, that we coddle her too much." Robert felt bile rise in his throat as he remembered the words. His mother, Helena, was 76 and suffered from severe arthritis in both legs, which left her dependent on a wheelchair most of the time. Since the stroke she had suffered 2 years ago, she also had difficulty speaking, although she understood everything perfectly. She was a sweet woman with a shy smile and eyes that still held the light of someone who believed in people. Robert loved her deeply, but in recent months he had been too absent, absorbed by business and his approaching wedding. Christine Vance had entered his life like an elegant hurricane, blonde, tall, with an MBA in administration and a silver tongue that charmed investors in business meetings. She seemed perfect. She dressed impeccably, spoke 3 languages, knew how to choose expensive wines, and moved naturally among Manhattan's elite. When Robert met her at a charity event at the Museum of Art, he was attracted not only by her beauty, but by the sharp intelligence she displayed. 6 months later, he proposed. The ceremony was scheduled for October at the Plaza Hotel. But something had changed. In the last 3 months since Christine had moved into the mansion, claiming she needed to organize the wedding preparations more closely, the house that once breathed warmth had transformed into a tense, overly silent space. Robert noticed, but attributed it to the pressure of the preparations. Until Martha called. He needed to see it with his own eyes. He needed to understand what was happening inside his own home while he spent 12 hours a day locked in meetings. And for that, he had decided to do something that seemed straight out of a movie: disguise himself, be invisible, become someone no one would pay enough attention to put on an act in front of. Robert opened the car door and walked to the simple boarding house he had rented on the street behind. In the modest room with peeling walls, he put on the gardener's clothes he had bought at a discount store in Queens, worn-out jeans, a white cotton t-shirt, a faded cap. He applied the fake beard he had ordered online, adjusted the fake prescription glasses, and looked at himself in the foggy mirror. The reflection was unrecognizable. He looked older, tired, common, exactly what he needed. Before leaving, he took out his phone and called Bruno, his college friend, and the only confidant in this absurd plan. "Is it all set?" Robert asked. Bruno, a theater actor with 15 years of experience, laughed on the other end of the line. "Relax, man. I'll handle all your calls as if you're in Miami closing that resort deal. No one will suspect a thing." "Thanks, Bruno. Seriously. Just don't forget to pay me well for this performance. And take care, okay? This thing you're doing is kind of crazy." Robert hung up and put the phone in his pocket. Crazy or not, it was necessary. He walked to the mansion and rang the bell at the service entrance. Martha opened the door and almost dropped the pot she was holding when she recognized him behind the disguise. He brought a finger to his lips, asking for silence. "I'm the new gardener, Martha. My name is Joe. Understand?" The woman, with her grey hair tied in a tight bun, swallowed hard, and nodded. "Of course, Mr. Robert. I mean Joe." She led him to the staff room on the ground floor, a simple space with a single bed, a formica wardrobe and a window overlooking the back garden. This would be his base. From here, he would watch everything. For the first few days, Robert worked under the scorching sun, weeding flower beds, watering plants, pruning shrubs. He felt his muscles ache in a way he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. His hands, accustomed to holding Mont Blanc pens and latest generation tablets, now held hoes and pruning shears. But the physical pain was irrelevant compared to what his eyes were beginning to witness. Christine commanded the house like a general. Her voice echoed through the halls, giving orders to the staff in a tone that brooked no argument. Joanna, a middle-aged black woman who had worked there for 10 years, trembled when Christine approached. The driver, Mr. Arthur, avoided crossing paths with her in the corridors. Even Martha, always so steadfast, lowered her eyes when the mistress entered the kitchen. But it was with Helena that Robert realized the true extent of the problem. On the first morning, while trimming the rose bushes near his mother's bedroom balcony, he saw her being helped out of bed by the new caregiver. The young woman was at most 25, with brown hair tied in a ponytail and delicate movements. She spoke softly to Helena, smiling, adjusting the pillows with care. Robert felt his chest tighten, seeing his mother's face, thinner than he remembered, with deep, dark circles under her eyes and an expression of sadness he had never seen before. "Good morning, Mrs. Helena. Did you sleep well?" the caregiver asked in a gentle voice. Helena tried to answer, but the words came out jumbled, slurred. The young woman showed no impatience. She just held her hand and said, "I understand. Let's have breakfast slowly today, no rush at all." That's when Christine entered the room like a whirlwind, still in a silk robe, her hair perfectly coiffed, her makeup impeccable even at 7 in the morning. Her French perfume invaded the space. "Marina, how many times do I have to tell you not to let her get so relaxed in bed? The physical therapist said she needs to be sitting up. Do you want her to atrophy completely?" Marina, the caregiver, remained calm. "Miss Christine, I was just helping her sit up. It's a process. It needs care. Care, you coddle. Her too much. My father-in-law pays you to work, not to give her affection." Robert crouched among the rose bushes, clenched his fists so tightly his nails dug into his palms. He took a deep breath. He couldn't reveal himself yet. He needed more. He needed concrete proof. In the following days, the routine repeated with cruel variations. Christine demanded efficiency from the staff with harshness, but it was with Helena that her impatience overflowed. If the elderly woman dropped something, she was met with a loud sigh of irritation. If she took too long to chew, she received disapproving glares. If she asked for something, she was attended to with reluctance. And all of this happened away from Robert's eyes, or rather, away from the eyes of the person she believed to be Robert. Marina, on the other hand, was a stark contrast. The young woman had arrived at the house just 2 weeks earlier, recommended by a caregiver agency. Robert vaguely remembered signing the authorization to hire her, but hadn't met her in person. Now, in disguise, he observed her every gesture with growing attention. Marina didn't just care for Helena's body. She cared for her soul. She sang softly while combing the elderly woman's white hair. She read excerpts from books in the afternoon. She showed old photos she found in albums and asked about the stories behind them. Even when Helena couldn't answer properly, Marina would smile and say, "I can imagine how beautiful it must have been." Robert noticed that Marina also treated him with a rare kindness. She brought him cold water when the sun was too strong. She offered fruit left over from Helena's breakfast. She asked if he needed anything. There was no contempt in her gaze as there was in Christine's. When she looked at the staff, there was recognition, humanity. "You're new here, aren't you, Joe?" Marina asked one day, while helping Helena sunbathe on the balcony. Robert, who was trimming the nearby lawn, looked up. "I am, miss. Started this week." "Do you like gardening?" "I do. I think we learn a lot from plants. They grow slowly, but they grow. And when we take good care of them, they blossom." Marina smiled. "That's beautiful. It's true. Care makes all the difference, doesn't it? He nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. It does. That night, lying in the cramped bed of the staff room, Robert took a notebook he had bought and began to write. He noted everything, every sentence from Christine, every gesture of contempt, every moment his mother seemed smaller, sadder, more alone. And he also noted every gesture from Marina, every smile she gave Helena, every word of encouragement. On the last page, he wrote something that had been hammering in his head since he began this charade. If silence protects, I will remain silent. But if the truth sets free, I will speak when the time is right. He knew that time was coming. But first, he needed to gather everything, every piece of proof, every silent witness. Because when he revealed who he really was, there would be no room for doubt. There would be no room for excuses. There would only be the raw, naked truth exposed to the light of day, as painful as a cut, but as necessary as air. Robert turned off the light and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would be another day of observation, another day of contained pain, another day of guarded truths. But each day brought him closer to the moment when everything would change, and, when that moment came, he would ensure that his mother would never again shed a tear because of someone who was supposed to protect her. The night wind blew in through the window, carrying the scent of the roses he himself had pruned. On the balcony of Helena's room the light was still on. Robert imagined his mother there alone, looking at the ceiling, perhaps praying, perhaps just waiting for time to pass. And he felt, for the first time in a long time, an absolute certainty of what he needed to do. The truth always comes out. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it hurts. But it always comes. And Robert Miller was determined to be the instrument of that truth, even if it cost him everything he had built alongside Christine. Because in the end, what mattered wasn't the wedding. It wasn't his reputation. It wasn't the money. What mattered was that 76-year-old woman who had given him life and who now needed him to give her back her dignity. And he would do it, whatever it took. If this story has interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. Robert's second week as the gardener, Joe began with a light rain that had been drenching New York since dawn. The grey sky seemed to weigh on the Upper East Side mansion, and inside, the tension grew like the humidity in the air. Robert woke up early as usual and headed to the kitchen for the staff's breakfast. Martha was already there, preparing cheese scones and freshly brewed coffee. The comforting smell contrasted with the worried expression on the cook's face. "Good morning, Martha. Everything okay?" Robert asked, pouring himself a steaming mug. The woman looked around, making sure they were alone, and whispered, "Joe, last night was bad." Miss Christine argued with Marina over one of Mrs. Helena's medications. She said the girl was slacking off, that she wasn't following instructions properly. Robert felt his jaw clench. "And Marina?" The girl didn't talk back. She just lowered her head and kept working. "But I saw her when she left Mrs. Helena's room. She was crying, Joe, crying softly, hiding in the hallway." Robert's heart ached. Marina had been there for such a short time and was already carrying the weight of Christine's cruelty. He took a sip of coffee, feeling the hot liquid go down his throat, but it couldn't warm the cold anger growing inside him. He needed to act, but cautiously. Every step had to be calculated. "I'll keep an eye out, Martha. Don't worry." The cook nodded, but her eyes still shone with concern. This house, which had once been a home full of laughter when Robert's late wife was still alive, now felt like an elegant prison. The marble walls held secrets. The crystal chandeliers illuminated lies, and all of it under the command of a woman who knew how to play the part of the perfect fiancée when necessary. Robert finished his coffee and went out to the garden. The light rain continued to fall, wetting the leaves of the royal palms that lined the main entrance. He began working on the flower beds near the living room, where he had a privileged view of what was happening inside the house through the large windows. It was there that he saw Marina coming down the stairs, pushing the wheelchair with Helena seated in it. The elderly woman was wearing a light pink robe and had a blanket over her legs. Her face was pale, her eyes fixed on nothing. Marina took her to the living room and positioned the chair near the fireplace, although there was no fire lit. The young woman knelt beside the elderly woman and held her hand gently. "Mrs. Helena, we're going to do our physical therapy exercises today, okay? I'll put on some soft music and we'll take it easy, at your own pace." Helena turned her face toward Marina and, with great effort, managed to articulate a word. "Thank you." Marina smiled, and in that smile there was so much tenderness that Robert felt his eyes burn. How was it possible that a stranger showed more love for his mother than the fiancé who shared his bed? The answer was painful and obvious. Christine loved no one but herself. That's when the living room door opened abruptly. Christine strode in, wearing a designer tracksuit that cost more than Marina's monthly salary. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a high, flawless ponytail. She held her phone in her hand and was speaking loudly, clearly on a work call. "Yes, I know the deadline is tight, but that's not my problem. You need to find a solution." "No, I'm not postponing the event. Everything has to be perfect." She hung up the phone and only then noticed Marina and Helena in the room. Her face immediately hardened. "Marina, what are you doing here? The physical therapy is scheduled for 10, not 9. Marina kept her voice calm, although Robert noticed a slight tremor in it. "Ms. Christine, I thought it would be better to start earlier because Mrs. Helena slept well and has more energy now." "I didn't ask you to think, Marina. I asked you to follow the schedule the physical therapist left. Do you think you know more than a trained professional?" "No, I just wanted to take advantage of the moment when she's feeling better." Christine took 2 steps toward Marina, her voice taking on an even sharper edge. "Look here, sweetie. You were hired to follow orders, not to invent methods. If you keep doing things your way, I'll have to reconsider your employment here." Marina swallowed hard and nodded. "I'm sorry, Miss Christine." "Sorry doesn't fix it. Action does. Now take her back to her room and wait for the right time." Robert outside gripped the tool he was holding so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He saw everything. He heard everything. And every cell in his body screamed for him to go into that room, rip off the disguise and confront Christine right then and there. But he couldn't. Not yet. He needed more. Marina stood up, pale, and began to push Helena's wheelchair back toward the hallway. As they passed Christine, the elderly woman looked up and stared at her daughter-in-law. There were no words, but the look said everything. It was a mixture of sadness, fear, and resignation. Christine averted her gaze as if her mother-in-law were invisible and went back to her phone. Robert waited until they had left and Christine had also left the room. Then, with his heart hammering in his chest, he discreetly entered through the kitchen door and went up the service stairs to the 2nd floor. He needed to see his mother up close, even if just for a few moments. In the hallway, he found Marina standing in front of Helena's bedroom door. The young woman had her face buried in her hands, her shoulders trembling slightly. She was crying. Robert approached slowly and touched her shoulder gently. Marina turned around, startled, and quickly wiped her tears. "I'm sorry, Joe. I didn't want anyone to see me like this." "You don't need to be sorry, miss. You did nothing wrong." She let out a shaky sigh. "Sometimes I wonder if I am doing something wrong, you know. I try to take care of Mrs. Helena in the best way possible, but it seems like nothing I do is good enough for Ms. Christine." Robert chose his words carefully. "You're doing everything right, Marina. I see how you treat Mrs. Helena. With kindness, with respect. That's worth more than any schedule." Marina looked at him in surprise, as if not expecting such kind words from a gardener. "Thank you, Joe. You're very kind." She went into the room, closing the door behind her. Robert stood there for a few seconds, fighting the urge to go in too. But he knew he couldn't. It wasn't time yet. He went back down the stairs and returned to the garden, where the light rain continued to fall, washing the earth, but not washing away the pain he carried. The following days brought more evidence of Christine's true nature. One afternoon, Robert overheard her on the phone with one of her friends, laughing and making jokes about her mother-in-law's situation. "Seriously, darling, it's such a pain to pretend I care about the old woman, but it's only until the wedding. Afterward, I'll put her in a home and that's it, problem solved. Robert will never know it was my idea." The words pierced Robert like knives. So that was it. Christine was just waiting for the wedding to get rid of Helena, to push her into an institution and take full control of the house and likely the finances as well. He felt sick. That night, Robert couldn't sleep. He lay in the cramped room staring at the cracked ceiling, thinking of all the times he had ignored the signs. The times Christine made subtle comments about Helena being a burden. The times she suggested it would be better to hire full-time professional care away from home. He had always thought she was concerned for his mother's well-being. Now he understood it was the exact opposite. The next morning, a sunny Friday, Christine announced she was hosting a lunch for some friends. The house went into a frantic pace of preparation. Martha was ordered to prepare an elaborate menu. Joanna had to clean every corner of the dining room until everything shone. The driver was instructed to pick up fresh flowers from the market, and Marina received a specific order: keep Helena in her room, away from the guests. But Christine changed her mind at the last minute. During breakfast, while going over the final details with Martha, she said, as if she'd had a revelation, "You know what? I'm going to do something different. I'll bring Helena to the lunch. It'll be good for my image to show that I take good care of her." Robert, who was cleaning his tools in the service area and heard everything, felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't kindness. It was theatre. Christine wanted to use his mother as a decorative piece to impress her rich friends. The lunch began at noon. 6 elegant women, all dressed in designer clothes, sat at the table set with fine china and crystal glasses. Christine was radiant, playing the part of the perfect hostess. And at the center of it all, seated in her wheelchair beside the table, was Helena. Dressed in a blue dress Robert didn't remember seeing. Before too tight in the shoulders, her hair styled so rigidly it made her face look even paler. Marina stood beside her, ready to assist with any need. But Christine had made it clear that the caregiver should be discreet, almost invisible. Robert, strategically positioned in the garden with a direct view of the dining room through the open glass doors, watched every detail. Christine's friends praised the house, the decor, the food, and, of course, they praised the care Christine supposedly took of her mother-in-law. "Christine, you're a saint for taking care of Helena like this. Not every daughter-in-law would do that," said one of them, with brown hair and expensive jewelry around her neck. Christine smiled modestly, lightly touching Helena's hand in a rehearsed gesture. "Oh, it's the least I can do. She's Robert's mother, practically my mother too. I love taking care of her." Robert felt the urge to vomit. The hypocrisy was so immense it seemed impossible that no one noticed. But Christine's friends just nodded, charmed by the narrative. During lunch, Helena tried to eat, but her hands trembled. Marina discreetly approached to help, but Christine stopped her with a sharp look. The elderly woman, embarrassed, tried to hold the fork on her own. That's when it happened. The fork slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor with a metallic clatter that echoed through the room. The silence was immediate. All conversations ceased. Helena froze, her eyes wide with shame. Marina took a step forward, but Christine was faster. She stood up, her face a mask of poorly disguised irritation. "Marina, didn't I tell you to pay attention? How could you let this happen?" Marina, pale, answered softly, "I'm sorry, Miss Christine. I tried to help, but you wouldn't let me." Christine ignored the response and turned to her friends with a forced smile. "Sorry for the inconvenience, girls. Let's continue." But Helena, still shaken, tried to lean over to pick up the fork. Her movement was too abrupt, and she ended up knocking over the glass of orange juice in front of her. The liquid spread across the immaculate white tablecloth. The orange stain grew rapidly, a visual symbol of the chaos that moment represented. Christine shot up, the chair scraping against the wooden floor. Her face turned red. Her friends stared aghast, and then, in a movement Robert would never forget, Christine raised her right hand, clenched in a threatening gesture, as if she were about to slap Helena. Time seemed to freeze. Robert dropped his pruning shears and took a step toward the door, ready to reveal everything in that instant. But before he could act, Marina threw herself in front of Helena. The slap that was meant for the elderly woman struck the young caregiver full in the face. The crack echoed through the room like a thunderclap. Christine's friends stood up at the same time, horrified. Christine froze, her face still red, her hand still in the air. as if she had just realized what she had done. Marina brought a hand to her face, where a red mark was beginning to appear, but she didn't cry. She just stood there, protecting Helena with her own body. It was at that moment that Robert could no longer contain himself. He entered through the service area door, crossed the kitchen under Martha's startled gaze, went up the stairs that led to the dining room, and stopped at the entrance. All heads turned toward him. A gardener, dirty with soil, in simple clothes, standing there as if he had something important to say. Christine looked at him with contempt. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Robert walked slowly to the center of the room. With calculated movements, he took off his cap. He removed the fake glasses, and finally, he tore off the fake beard, revealing his true face. The shock was instantaneous. Christine turned as white as the stained tablecloth. Her friends covered their mouths. Marina's eyes widened, and Helena, for the first time in a long time, showed something that looked like hope. Robert looked directly at Christine and said in a firm voice that echoed throughout the house, "It's me, Christine. Robert. The gardener you never noticed. The man who saw everything." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that precedes a storm, and Robert knew the storm was just beginning. The silence that fell over the dining room was so heavy it seemed to suck the air from everyone's lungs. Christine remained standing, frozen in place. Her face that moments before was red with rage now, as pale as marble. Her friends, 6 women representing Manhattan's elite, stared open-mouthed at the man who had just revealed himself. Marina held a hand to her still stinging cheek, but her eyes were fixed on Robert with a mixture of shock and understanding. And Helena, sitting in her wheelchair, had tears streaming silently down her wrinkled cheeks. Robert took another step toward Christine. His eyes, always gentle and warm when he looked at his mother, were now chips of ice fixed on the woman who had almost become his wife. He held the fake beard in his hand, as if it were physical evidence of the charade he had lived for the past few days. "Robert," Christine's voice came out shaky, brittle, but you were in Miami. How? Was I in Miami?" Robert let out a humorless laugh. "No, Christine, I was here, in this house, watching, seeing everything, every cruel word, every gesture of contempt, every moment you mistreated my mother, thinking no one was watching." One of Christine's friends, the one with brown hair and expensive jewelry, took a step back, as if wanting to distance herself from the scene. "Christine, what is going on here?" Christine opened and closed her mouth several times, searching for words that wouldn't come. Her mind seemed to be working frantically, looking for some explanation, some justification, some way to reverse the situation. But there was no way out. The truth was there, exposed under the sunlight streaming through the large windows. Robert walked to the table and pulled his phone from the pocket of his gardener's pants. With a few taps on the screen, he accessed the recordings he had discreetly made over the past few days. The first recording began to play. It was Christine's voice, loud and clear, saying words that made the friends present shrink back even further. "Seriously, darling, it's such a pain to pretend I care about the old woman, but it's only until the wedding. Afterward, I'll put her in a home and that's it, problem solved. Robert will never know it was my idea." The audio echoed through the room like a sentence. Christine's friends glanced at each other, horrified. One of them muttered something inaudible and grabbed her purse, clearly wanting to get out of there as quickly as possible. Another shook her head in disbelief. Christine tried to speak, but Robert raised his hand, silencing her. "There's more," he said, and played another audio file. This time it was a conversation between Christine and Marina, captured when Robert was working near Helena's bedroom window. Christine's voice was sharp, authoritarian. "You coddle this woman too much, Marina. She needs discipline, not affection. What do you think you'll achieve by being nice? She's not going to get better. She's only going to get worse. So stop wasting time singing songs and being gentle. Do the job you're being paid for." Marina, hearing her own recorded words responding in that calm, firm voice, felt the tears return. But this time they weren't tears of humiliation, they were tears of relief. Finally, someone had seen, someone had heard, someone knew the truth. Robert turned off the phone and faced Christine directly. For 2 weeks I worked as a gardener in my own home. I mowed the lawn under the scorching sun. I pruned rose bushes. I weeded flower beds. And every single one of those days, I saw who you really are. I saw how you treat the people who work here as if they were invisible. I saw how you humiliate my mother when you think no one is looking. And I saw how you planned to get rid of her as soon as the wedding was official. Christine finally found her voice, though it was still trembling. Robert, you don't understand. I was trying to help. Your mother needs professional care. I only wanted what was best for her. What was best for her? Robert's voice rose an octave. You raised your hand to hit her, Christine. If Marina hadn't stepped in front, you would have struck a 76-year-old woman in a wheelchair who can barely speak. Is that the best you can offer? It was an accident. I was nervous. The lunch was ruined. Robert took a step forward, and Christine instinctively recoiled. It wasn't an accident. It was the truth. The truth you hid behind fake smiles, elegant dinners, and empty promises. The truth I would have discovered sooner or later, but thank God I discovered it now, before it was too late. One of Christine's friends, an older woman with grey hair and an elegant posture, cleared her throat and said in a firm voice, Christine, I think it's best we leave. Clearly there are private matters you and Robert need to resolve. The others quickly agreed, grabbing their purses and exiting the room in a hurried procession. Christine tried to stop them, murmured apologies, tried to explain, but they had already seen and heard too much. In less than 2 minutes the room was empty, except for Robert, Christine, Marina, and Helena. Christine turned to Robert, and now there was something different in her eyes. No longer fear or shock. It was anger. Anger at being exposed, anger at losing control. You humiliated me, Robert, in front of my friends. You planned this. You set me up. Robert shook his head slowly. I didn't humiliate you, Christine. You did that to yourself. I just brought to light what you were doing in the shadows. And you know what's worse? You don't even have the decency to apologize. Not to my mother, not to Marina, not to anyone. You're just angry because you got caught. Christine crossed her arms, her posture defensive. And what are you going to do now? Kick me out? Cancel the wedding? Ruin my reputation? The wedding is cancelled. That's not even a discussion. As for kicking you out, yes. I want you out of my house today. Now. Pack your things and go. Marina, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. Excuse me, but I need to take care of Mrs. Helena. She's very shaken. Robert nodded. Please, Marina, take her to her room and thank you for everything. Marina pushed the wheelchair toward the hallway, but before leaving she stopped beside Robert and whispered, You did the right thing. She deserved to be protected. He just nodded, feeling the lump in his throat tighten. When Marina and Helena left, only he and Christine remained in the room, devastated by the interrupted lunch. The tablecloth was still stained with orange juice, the plates half full, the wine glasses untouched. It was a perfect image of what their relationship had been, beautiful on the outside, rotten on the inside. Christine took a step toward him, trying one last gambit. Robert, please, we can talk about this. I admit I was wrong. I was stressed about the wedding, the preparations. I'm not like this. You know me. I thought I knew you, but the woman I knew would never raise a hand to strike someone defenseless, would never speak about my mother as if she were a burden, a problem to be solved. The woman I knew doesn't exist, Christine. Maybe she never did. Christine closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, there were tears in them. But Robert didn't know if they were genuine tears or just another performance. You're going to regret this. You're throwing away what we had. What we had was built on lies, and I prefer loneliness to the company of someone who hurts the people I love. Christine wiped her tears with the back of her hand, and her expression hardened again. Fine. You want me to go? I'll go. But don't think this is over. My lawyers will be in touch. Robert shrugged. Let them. I have all. The proof I need. Recordings. Witnesses. You don't have a case. Christine stared at him for a few more seconds, then turned and walked out of the room, her high heels echoing down the marble hallway. Robert heard her go up the stairs to the bedroom they shared. He heard drawers being opened and slammed shut, suitcases being dragged, and about half an hour later he heard her car leaving the garage, the tires screeching on the pavement. And then, Finally, silence. Robert sat down in one of the dining room chairs and buried his face in his hands. The last 2 weeks had been the hardest of his life, pretending to be someone else, watching his mother suffer and not being able to comfort her immediately, witnessing cruelty and having to remain silent. Now that it was all over, exhaustion fell over him like a weight. It was Martha who found him like that minutes later. The cook entered the room, saw the mess, saw Robert sitting there, and understood everything without needing a word. She approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Robert, you did what had to be done." He lifted his face and Martha saw there were tears in his eyes. "I should have realized sooner, Martha. I should have protected my mother." "You did protect her, in the way you could, and now she's safe." Robert stood up, wiped his eyes, and took a deep breath. "Where is my mother?" "In her room with Marina. The girl is taking care of her." He nodded and walked toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he reached Helena's room, he paused at the door for a moment, watching. Marina was sitting by the bed holding the elderly woman's hand and speaking softly. Helena's eyes were closed, but her face looked more peaceful than Robert had seen it in a long time. He knocked lightly on the door. Marina turned and, upon seeing him, stood up. "I'll let you two talk," she said, but Robert shook his head. "No, Marina, stay, please. You're a part of this too." Marina hesitated, but eventually sat back down. Robert pulled up a chair and sat on the other side of the bed. He took his mother's free hand, and she slowly opened her eyes. When she saw her son, truly saw him without disguises, without barriers, a small but genuine smile appeared on her lips. "Mum," he began, and his voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't realize what was happening. I'm sorry I left you alone with her." Helena squeezed his hand with all the strength she could muster. She tried to speak, and the words came out slurred but understandable. "Not your fault. It is. I should have been here. I should have paid attention. But I promise you, Mum. I promise I will never let anyone hurt you again. Never again." The tears were flowing freely now from both of them. Marina, sitting there, was also crying silently, witnessing this moment of reconciliation and love. Robert stayed there for hours, holding his mother's hand, telling her everything that had happened over the past 2 weeks. How he had disguised himself, how he had worked in the garden, how he had seen every moment of Marina's kindness and every moment of Christine's cruelty. And Helena listened, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, but always squeezing her son's hand. As the sun began to set, painting the New York sky in shades of orange and pink, Robert finally stood up. Marina had fallen, asleep in her chair, emotionally exhausted. Helena was also sleeping, but her sleep seemed peaceful for the first time in a long time. Robert left the room carefully, closing the door slowly. In the hallway, he found Martha waiting. "How is she?" the cook asked. "Better. Much better. And you, sir?" Robert smiled for the first time in weeks. "I'm better too, Martha. I am too." He went down the stairs and to the room he had shared with Christine. Everything of hers was gone. The clothes, the shoes, the expensive perfumes. It was as if she had never been there. And perhaps, Robert thought, that was exactly what he needed. A fresh start. A house cleansed of lies. The next morning, Robert woke up early and for the first time in 2 weeks, showered in his own bathroom. He put on clean, comfortable clothes. He went down to the kitchen and had coffee with Martha, Joanna, and the driver, Mr. Arthur. They talked about simple things, about the weather, about the garden that needed tending, about life. And when Marina came down with Helena for breakfast, Robert greeted them with a genuine smile. He helped his mother sit at the table. He poured fresh orange juice, and as they ate together, he realized something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The house that had become a prison was slowly becoming a home again. The walls that held secrets now held promises. And Robert knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, there would be difficult moments, but there would also be truth, there would be dignity, and there would be love. And in the end, That was all that truly mattered. The first rays of Saturday morning sun streamed through the windows of the Upper East Side mansion, illuminating a scene Robert hadn't seen in a long time, his mother smiling. Helena was sitting on her bedroom balcony, wrapped in a light blanket, watching the garden her son loved so much. 3 weeks had passed since Christine had left the house, and each day brought a small transformation. The tension that once permeated every room had given way to an almost palpable lightness. The hallways once again echoed with the sounds of life, soft music coming from the elderly woman's room, quiet conversations in the kitchen, even occasional laughter that Robert hadn't heard since before his mother's stroke. Marina continued to work as a caregiver, but now there was something different about her presence. She was no longer just an employee following orders. She had become an essential part of that home, a bridge between the painful past and the future that was beginning to take shape. Robert observed day after day how the young woman treated Helena not just with professionalism, but with a genuine affection that warmed his heart. On that particular morning, Robert woke to the smell of homemade bread coming from the kitchen. Martha had started making the recipes Helena loved so much again, the ones that had been banned by Christine for being too caloric. He came down the stairs wearing a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, his bare feet touching the cold marble floor. In the kitchen, he found Martha taking a batch of cheese scones out of the oven. "Good morning, Martha, that smells wonderful." The cook smiled, that wide smile that lit up her time-worn face. "Good morning, Mr. Robert. I thought I'd make a special breakfast today. It's been a while since we've had a peaceful Saturday." Robert took a still warm scone and bit into it, feeling the melted cheese in his mouth. It's true, it feels like the house is breathing again. Martha wiped her hands on her apron and came closer, lowering her voice. "Sir, can I say something?" "Of course, always." Marina is a special young woman. The way she cares for Mrs. Helena, how she treats everyone here with respect. We didn't have that before. Robert nodded thoughtfully. "I know, I've noticed. And you've changed too, if you don't mind me saying. You're more present, more attentive." Mrs. Helena notices. Yesterday she told me in her own way that she was happy. Martha's words touched something deep inside Robert. For years he had lost himself in business, in endless meetings, in the pursuit of a success that never seemed to be enough. Christine had fed that ambition, always pushing him for more, for bigger. Now, without her, he was rediscovering what truly mattered, being present for the one he loved. "Thank you for telling me that, Martha." He finished his coffee and went up to see his mother. He found her on the balcony with Marina, who was reading aloud from a book of classic American short stories. Helena had her eyes, half closed, enjoying the gentle morning breeze and the caregiver's melodious voice. Robert paused at the door, just watching, reluctant to interrupt that moment of peace. Marina noticed his presence and smiled. "Good morning, Robert." In the last few days, she had started calling him by his first name, dropping the formal Joe or Mr. Robert. It was a sign that the barriers between them were falling, that a genuine friendship was beginning to blossom. He liked that. He liked the natural way she spoke, the sincerity in her gestures. "Good morning, Marina." "Good morning, Mum." Helena opened her eyes fully and held out her hand toward her son. Robert approached and took that wrinkled hand, feeling the surprising strength in her grip. The physical therapy was working. Marina dedicated hours every day helping Helena with exercises, massages, and stretches, and the results were visible. "How did you sleep?" he asked. Helena made an effort and articulated, "Well, I dreamed of your father." Robert's eyes immediately filled with tears. His father had passed away 15 years ago from a sudden heart attack. Helena rarely mentioned her husband, as if the pain of the loss was still too great to put into words. That he had appeared in her dreams was a sign that her mind was more at ease, less tormented. "Was it a good dream?" Marina asked, gently touching the elderly woman's shoulder. Helena nodded, a small but genuine smile appearing on her lips. "He said that you take good care of me." The sentence, spoken with such effort but with such emotional clarity, made Marina place a hand on her chest. Robert saw tears well up in the young woman's eyes and felt his own throat tighten. How many times in recent years had he heard his mother express such deep feelings? Very few. Christine didn't allow space for that. But now, in this new beginning, Helena was rediscovering her voice. "I take care of you because you deserve it, Mrs. Helena. And because I'm very fond of you," Marina said, her voice thick with emotion. Robert left them talking and went downstairs again. He had decided to take the Saturday to personally tend to the garden, not as a disguised gardener, but as himself, just a man who needed to put his hands in the earth and feel connected to something simple and true. He put on old clothes, got his tools, and started working on the rose bushes he loved so much. He was pruning a particularly rebellious bush when Marina appeared in the garden, carrying a glass of iced lemonade. "I thought you might like something to drink." "Thank you." He took the glass and drank long gulps, feeling the cold liquid go down his throat. "Sit with me for a little while." Marina hesitated for a second, but ended up sitting on the grass beside him. They were silent for a few moments, just watching the garden and listening to the birds singing in the trees. "Marina, I never properly thanked you for what you did," Robert began. "You protected my mother when I couldn't. You stood up to Christine even at the risk of losing your job. You don't need to thank me," she interrupted softly. "I did what any decent person would do." "But you were the only one who did. I was so blind, so absorbed in my business and the life I thought I had, that I didn't see what was happening right under my nose." Marina looked at him with those brown eyes that always seemed to see beyond appearances. "You weren't blind, Robert. You were trusting. And there's nothing wrong with trusting. The fault was hers, not yours. But I should have noticed. And you did. When it mattered. You did something that many people wouldn't have the courage to do. You disguised yourself, humbled yourself, worked as a gardener, just to be sure of the truth. That shows who you really are." Her words calmed something inside him, a guilt he had been carrying since the day of the reveal. He looked at Marina and for the first time allowed himself to really see her, not just as his mother's caregiver, but as the strong, kind and brave woman she was. And he realized something was changing inside him, a feeling he hadn't expected, hadn't sought, but that was there, growing silently like the flowers he tended. "Do you have plans for the future, Marina?" he asked, and immediately regretted the invasive question. "Sorry, that's none of my business." She smiled. "It's okay. I don't know, to be honest. I studied nursing but didn't finish my degree. I had to work to help my mother after my father got sick. I always thought about going back to school someday. And why not now?" Marina shrugged. "Money, mostly, and time. Caring for patients full-time doesn't leave much room for other things." Robert was thoughtful for a moment. "What if I helped you, paid for the rest of your degree, and adjusted your schedule here so you could study?" Marina looked at him, surprised. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because you deserve it. Because you take care of the most important person in my life with a love I didn't even know still existed in the world. And because I want to see you achieve your dreams." Tears returned to Marina's eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Say you'll let me help you, just like you helped me." She nodded, unable to speak, and Robert felt a genuine joy fill his chest. In that moment, sitting in the garden under the New York sun, something between them shifted. It was no longer just gratitude or professional respect. It was the beginning of something deeper, more true. The following weeks brought concrete changes. Robert enrolled Marina in a private university where she could finish her nursing degree. He adjusted her hours so she would have time to study. And in the moments when Marina was at college, he himself took care of Helena, rediscovering the joy of spending time with his mother, of listening to her fragmented stories, of making her smile. Helena also continued to improve. The intensive physical therapy, combined with the loving environment and the absence of stress, worked wonders. She began to pronounce words with more clarity. She could move her fingers with more coordination, and most importantly, she began to have hope again. One Thursday afternoon, almost 2 months after Christine's departure, Robert received a call from his lawyer. "She tried to sue you for breach of promise, but she failed. The evidence you have is irrefutable, and there's more. Some of the friends who were at the lunch gave testimony in your favor. Christine has no case." Robert thanked him and hung up. He felt no anger toward Christine, no satisfaction in the legal victory, just a quiet sadness for having wasted time with someone who never truly loved him, who only saw him as an opportunity for social and financial gain. That night, Robert prepared a special dinner. He asked Martha to make Helena's favorite dish, roast chicken with mashed potatoes and green beans. He set the dining room table with the good china that was saved for special occasions. He invited all the house staff, Martha, Joanna, Mr. Arthur, and of course, Marina. When everyone was seated at the table, Robert stood up with a glass of juice in his hands. "I want to make a toast to the last few months, which were difficult but taught us a lot, to the truth that always sets us free, even when it hurts, and to the people around this table who have proven that family isn't just blood, it's a choice. It's love. It's being there in the difficult moments." Everyone raised their glasses and toasted. Helena, sitting in her wheelchair adapted for the table, had tears in her eyes, but also a wide smile on her face. Marina, beside her, held her hand, and Robert, looking at that scene, felt that he was finally home. Truly. After dinner, when everyone had retired, Robert and Marina stayed on the balcony, watching the lights of New York twinkle in the distance. The air was cool, filled with the fragrance of the garden, flowers. "Thank you for tonight," Marina said. "I've never felt like part of a real family before." Robert looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "My family is complicated. My father had a drinking problem. My mother worked too much to support us. My siblings left home early. We never had these moments of togetherness, you know, of being together simply because we want to be." He took her hand, a gesture that came naturally without thinking. "Well, now you do. You are part of this family, Marina, and I hope you'll stay for a very long time." She intertwined her fingers with his and rested her head on his shoulder. "I hope so too." They stayed like that for a long time, in a comfortable silence, just enjoying each other's presence. Robert knew it was too soon to name what he was feeling. He knew he had just come out of a disastrous relationship and needed time to heal, but he also knew that Marina was special, that what was growing between them was real, built on a solid foundation of respect, admiration, and truth. The following months brought more transformations. Helena continued to progress in her physical therapy and surprised everyone by managing to take a few steps with the help of a walker. It was a moment of tears and celebration. Robert was there, holding her, Marina on the other side, and when the elderly woman took her third step, she looked at her son and said with surprising clarity, "I'm proud of you." Marina graduated from nursing school with honors, and Robert was in the front row of the graduation ceremony, giving a standing ovation as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma. Helena, in her wheelchair decorated with balloons, was also there, smiling more than Robert had seen her smile in years. And on a December evening, as the year drew to a close, Robert took Marina to dinner at a charming restaurant in Greenwich Village. Under the soft lights and to the sound of live jazz, he held her hand across the table and said, "Marina, I know the time we've spent together started in an unusual way. I was in disguise, you were just doing your job. But somewhere along the way these past few months, something changed. At least for me, I fell in love with you, with kindness, your strength, the way you light up every room you enter. And I wanted to know if you might feel the same." Marina had tears in her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I do, Robert. Ever since that day you revealed yourself as the gardener, I knew there was something special about you. And every day we've spent together has only confirmed it." He leaned across the table and kissed her, a soft kiss full of promise. There, in that small New York restaurant, a new story officially began. A story built on truth, respect, and genuine love. When they returned home that night, they found Helena awake, waiting for them in the living room. Martha was beside her, smiling as if she knew a secret. The elderly woman looked at the two of them, holding hands, and said, "Finally." They all laughed, and in that laughter there was pure joy, freedom, and the certainty that the worst was behind them. The future was uncertain, as it always is, but they would face it together, as a family, as people who chose to love truly, without masks, without lies, without fear. Robert looked around the room where so much had happened. There he had discovered betrayal. There he had revealed the truth, and there now he found redemption. The house that had almost become a tomb of lies was once again a home full of life. And as he hugged Marina and held his mother's hand, Robert understood something fundamental. Sometimes you have to disguise yourself to see the truth. You have to strip away everything you think you are to discover who you really are. And you have to have the courage to let go of what hurts you, even when it's hard, even when it's painful, to make room for what heals you. The truth always sets you free, and love always wins. Always. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Robert, Helena, and Marina has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of courage, truth, and redemption, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Was it when Robert disguised himself as a gardener? Was it when Marina protected Helena? Or was it the happy ending they all deserved? Every day we bring intense stories, like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul, which show that true love always finds a way, and that the truth, no matter how painful, is always liberating. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode, with another story that will stir your emotions and make you believe that there is always hope, even in the darkest of times. See you soon.